how would you rank the other guys coming out if you had to, put Lawerence 1 and then who's 2 through 5 in your rankings?
Yeah, I like Zach Wilson a lot. I don't have any problem with him going number 2. I think arm talent-wise, look, there's a lot of questions about, strength of schedule and who he played against. I get that. But I think if you just evaluate the throws and evaluate the tape and don't necessarily look at who he's playing against, because a lot of times, if you're comparing who he played against versus Justin Fields, it's kind of apples to oranges sometimes. You just evaluate the throws. Man, you can see the arm talent. You can see kind of what the NFL and the trends where they're looking for quarterbacks that can throw off platform, that can throw without having every single bit of their lower body into every throw. And so you see that, and it excites you a lot. So I would have him number 2. 3, 4, and 5. I like Justin Fields 3, man. I still think San Francisco is kind of putting on this, this mirage and the smoke screen. I don't think you trade up or give away all those picks to get up to number 3 to take Mac Jones. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I have Justin Fields 3, Trey Lance 4. I think he's got a high ceiling, but he's a big time project, which is why I think he makes a lot of sense to Atlanta, sit behind Matt Ryan for 2 years and develop. And then Mac Jones would be, that second tier of quarterbacks that I would put kind of number 5. There's certain traits and skill sets to really like about Mac. I don't want to diminish that at all. But I think he's the most finished product out of all those guys.
You mentioned Zach Wilson and how you like him. A lot of people, the knock on Wilson, Hutson, you kind of mentioned it there. Oh, he played at BYU. He didn't go against anyone. And then there was this knock on him that he wasn't even the starter until this year. He had to win the job in training camp. And I just find both those things a bit absurd because we've seen guys come from nowhere and go high in the draft. Joe Burrow just did it a year ago. And as far as knocking the schedule, I mean, haven't we seen other quarterbacks play, quote unquote, inferior competition and end up being great? Josh Allen comes to mind right away. So can you kind of push back on those who are knocking Wilson and say he's not deserving of being the second pick in the draft?
No, I agree with you. I mean, there's you can look at guys' tape. I mean, even in the SEC to an extent, but like the Big Ten, for example. I mean, come on, you're telling me that out of Clemson and I'm trying to think who else Ohio State played last year that you wouldn't consider inferior. I mean, there's a lot of teams along that Ohio State schedule. When you compare them to the talent that Ohio State has, they're extremely inferior. And so that's why I say it's kind of hard to compare schedules and talent, apples to apples in that sense. That's why I think when you're evaluating the quarterback, you gotta evaluate the reps in themselves, in and of themselves, more so than looking at kind of the big picture and who you're going up against. I think talent is important to take into consideration, but and the other knock is how many games have you played? All these quarterbacks, and I think there's a heightened sense of awareness of this specific stat regarding these quarterbacks, how many games they played in college because of Mitchell Trubisky. He was the one guy in recent memory that came out of North Carolina. I think he only had like 13 or 14 games under his belt at UNC. You look at a lot of these guys besides Trevor Lawerence, Wilson, Fields, Lance, they're all under 20. I mean, I remember when I got cut by the Washington Redskins at the time, their general manager, Scott McCloonan, I was a one-year starter guy. I was a guy who only had about 15, 16 starts in my career, which is where all these guys kind of hover around. When I got released, one of the reasons they told me was, hey man, we kind of have this rule of thumb that, we don't draft quarterbacks or really take quarterbacks, unless they have more than 25 starts in their college career, which is about 2 years worth of tape. So I think that trend is kind of going by the wayside because we've seen some other guys kind of come in and have success that don't have as many as those starts. But I also think at the same time, all these GMs are really, really tender and aware of, man, if you're going to take one of these guys, you better feel really, really good that they're going to pan out, specifically because of what we've seen from Mitchell Trubisky. And you know what's crazy, Jake, is history will tell us that if we're lucky, out of these 5 quarterbacks that may go in the first round, if we're lucky, 2 of them a decade from now will be looked at as franchise quarterbacks and still starting in the NFL.